Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Suneel Gupta. Suneel served as founding CEO of Rise, a wellness company named App of the Year by Apple. And he's also a best-selling author of two books, most recently Everyday Dharma, a renowned speaker, a visiting scholar at Harvard Medical School, and the host of the docuseries Business Class, which explores the struggles, commitments, and resilience of entrepreneurs from around the world. Now streaming on Amazon Prime. I am deep into that thing and loving it. Suneel, welcome to the show.
Joe, thanks for having me.
So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish for everyone to know that there are two types of success, outer success and inner success. So outer success is wealth, it's status, it's achievement, and inner success is meaning, fulfillment, and joy. And both matter, but the key is that outer success, while wonderful, doesn't really lead us to inner success.
You talk in the book about this distinction of outer success and inner success, and leaders, of course, sit at the crossroads of that distinction of chasing success, of chasing a metric, chasing a measure, chasing a goal, versus a sense of who we are, not just what we do. That distinction becomes really clear in the book. Give us a quick explanation of that term, dharma,
Yeah.
because for a lot of people, there are multiple meanings out there. Maybe help put this into a helpful context for us. What do you mean?
Yeah. So Dharma is the alignment of who you are with how you show up each day. And the more in alignment you are, the more those two things sort of feel connected. The more confident, the more creative, the more lit up you are, the more you're expressing yourself with, I think, the conviction of what it is that you want to do. You feel clear. And the further away those two things are, the more exhausted you feel, the more depleted you feel, the more confused, and unclear, uncertain. And I think there's a lot of people in the workforce today that are feeling that way, right? And so, the art of Dharma is really not about sort of, pulling off a band-aid and all of a sudden realizing this epiphany of who you are and how it aligns to what you do. But I think the beauty of Dharma is that it's about these little adjustments. And you don't need big sweeping actions, but really like these tiny little habits. Sometimes even just these little 1% shifts that really bring us a little bit further towards, what my grandfather called the center of the wheel. Right. And every alignment you have, every little alignment you have brings us back to the center of who you are and to, the center of this wheel of Dharma.
Mm. So the more clear we are about our purpose and our place, the more confident we can be in pursuing our path.
That's right.
Yeah. So one of my favorite parts in the book focused on how all of this affects our happiness, right? And leaders certainly have a big impact on that. For entrepreneurs, especially out there, but also for people just working inside companies, there's this sense of I'll be happy when, right?
Yeah.
For entrepreneurs, I'll be happy when I get that $1 billion valuation or billion daily users, and for maybe people inside companies when I get that big promotion or when I'm recognized with those big awards. We heard Tal Ben-Shahar talk about this back on episode 151 with the arrival fallacy. Marshall Goldsmith on episode 100 talked about a similar theme. For those who think and feel that way, what's your reaction and advice for people chasing happiness on those terms?
Yeah, I mean, Tal Ben-Shahar's arrival fallacy, I think, is a great frame for this. This idea that we are going to hit this moment in time where we have accumulated enough wealth, enough status, enough success, or we're going to start to finally feel happy on the inside. And the problem, of course, being that every time we hit a goal, and the goalpost moves again and again. And there's a study out there where they interviewed and surveyed people across all different income ranges, and they asked them, how much money do you need in order to be happy? What needs to be in your bank account? And the answer was pretty much the same across the board. It was twice as much as I have right now. And that was true for people who were just barely making ends meet, and then people who had millions of dollars in the bank. Twice as much as I have right now, and I'll finally be happy, right? So it's a sliding scale, continues to move as we make progress, and therefore it's this never-ending chase. Now, Dharma puts us in the form of outer success and inner success, right? And outer success is status, it's wealth, it's achievement. And inner success is really about joy. It's about fulfillment. It's about meaning. And the idea isn't to shame outer success. If you're ambitious, you want things in life, there's nothing wrong with that. But the fallacy is really that outer success will lead us to inner success. We're going to have enough of it where eventually we're going to feel happy. And that's never really been the case. And there's plenty of science and research that proves it, but you don't really need the science and research. You can kind of probably look at your own life and the people around you to know that that's true. So what do we do? That's the question. And I think the answer is that we can reverse the flow. We can actually start with what it is that actually gives us fulfillment, what gives us joy, what gives us meaning. And we can throw ourselves into that so deeply, right, that we actually let that spill over into the world of outer success. And, for the past 10 years, I've been out there studying some of the most exceptional people on the planet across all different walks of life. And what I've realized is that for most of them, that switch eventually flipped. They weren't going after outer success anymore. They were going after inner success. And then just letting that really kind of spill over into everything that they did, right? And because of that, they were able to bring far more energy, far more creativity, far more collaborative spirit to the stuff they do, all the ingredients that we think about when we think about success.
So high performers are people who set things in motion, right? But one of the things that you've uncovered in studying some of these high performers is that they aren't always in motion, right? They realize the power of the pause, something you call rhythmic renewal.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, yeah. The average high performer is taking somewhere around 8 breaks every single day,
Oh,
which I know sounds like astounding, right? And the reason that it matters is because oftentimes we use vacations and long breaks as a way of dealing with burnout, right? And the problem is that vacations, while wonderful, are actually a pretty weak instrument when it comes to dealing with exhaustion. Most people report feeling more stressed out 1 week after vacation than they did 1 week before vacation, right? And so great way to see family, great way to, see other parts of the planet, but not a great way to deal with our own inner exhaustion, which so many of us feel right now. A much better path is this idea of rhythmic renewal, taking frequent, focused, deliberate rests every single day. So 8 breaks a day might sound like way too unpalatable given the world that we live in right now, right? I mean, it's back to back to back to back. And I think if anything, the past few years, it almost feels like it's gotten more squeezed, whether you're hybrid or remote or back in person, like it just feels like it's more back to back than ever before. But I think that one of the things that we can do is we can start to take little breaks every hour. And what I propose in the book is what I call the 55-5 model. 55-5. For every 55 minutes of work, we're taking 5 minutes of deliberate, focused rest. And that deliberate rest can be doing anything you enjoy. It could be sipping on a cup of coffee. It could be taking a walk. It could be meditating if that's your thing. It could be talking to a friend. So long as you're focused on that one thing, you're getting as disciplined about the rest as you are about the work itself. And when I talk to leaders about this, executives, and I've been doing this for years now and taking them through the 55-5 model, one of the pushbacks that I often get is, well, wait a second, like I'm trying to find more time in my day, and you're telling me to shrink each hour by 5 minutes. If I work a 9-hour day, that's 45 minutes of productivity that you're telling me to give up. And that is true to a certain extent. However, what the science tells us conclusively is that each of those 5 minutes is going to make the other 55 minutes far more effective, far more collaborative, far more imaginative, all the things that we think about when we think of high performance work. There was a study that was done by Microsoft where they had people wear these electroencephalography caps, these EEG caps, and they were measuring brain activity throughout the day. And they had one group that had no breaks and had another group that had breaks. And the group that had no breaks, I mean, literally, you could see their brain atrophy throughout the day, right? And it didn't take very long. It was like by 10 a.m., 11 a.m., you could see that their performance is going way, way down. But the other group that was just taking these small, deliberate breaks throughout the day, the level of performance they had at the beginning of the day mirrored how they were throughout the afternoon and even until the late parts of the day, right? So imagine that in the context of your work. What if the meetings that you were having with your colleagues and your partners and your clients were as effective and as sharp at the end of the day as they were at the beginning of the day, just by taking these little breaks throughout?
yeah. So these breaks aren't a detour; they're an on ramp.
That's right, exactly, and I think that's a great way of putting it because we have sort of been conditioned to believe that moments of rest are a reward for what we have just done, right? So we have to have achieved enough in order to deserve the rest. That's how most of us tend to see recovery. But what the science is telling us, and the way that high performers look at it, is almost the opposite, which is that rest is not a reward for what we have done, but a preparation for what we are about to do.
Yeah, I like that. Right. So it's about thinking about next steps, not about what's happened just before that.
That's right.
So success is never a sudden burst. It's almost always a slow drip. And yet, for so many people out there, inside organizations or running their own businesses, they think that you have to make sweeping changes instead of small adjustments. So all this really comes down to how we think about our habits, right?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it does. I mean, I think that to me was the key, I think, to the book. It's the key to what I do when I'm out there speaking as well. Is like we need simple, practical habits, right? We just don't have the time to go study big textbooks and to unpack things. We just need little things that we can try. The first time I realized this was when I was running a company called Rise, which is a company I started. We did one-on-one health coaching, and you know, I'd done a few startups, and this was the one that actually worked. We ended up selling it to a large healthcare company, and it's now owned by Amazon. But the thing that I learned the most is that, when people come to us, they were most often looking to lose weight or to lower their A1C levels or their cholesterol. So they had a health goal. And oftentimes what would happen is they would come to us saying, "Hey, I'm going to go paleo." Right? Or I've gone paleo and it's not working. And they were trying these sort of diets that were really kind of invasive. And part of the reason that they didn't work is because like they loved carbs, right? They love pasta, they love rice, right? And so every day felt like a slog for them, right? And the more that a habit feels like a slog, the less likely it is to stick. And so in the book, I talk about what I call high quality habits. It's these things that are good for us, but that we actually enjoy doing. So in the case of weight loss, for example, one of the things we would have our customers do, and we tested this across thousands of people that were on the platform, is just having literally a glass of water before every meal, right? One glass of water before every meal. And just seeing what that does to your appetite, right? And what we found in most cases is that people were eating less, they were having more energy, they felt more hydrated. But most importantly, it was a habit that people had no issue putting on repeat because having that glass of water it didn't feel like an enormous task. You could have fun with it. People started to have like, fun water bottles. They would put electrolytes in it. Like they would start to have more joy in the experience of the habit itself. I think Kevin Kelly from Wired Magazine put this the best. He was the founder of the magazine. He said, "We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to do our tasks better. But what we should be doing is actually trying to find tasks that we never actually want to stop doing."
Yeah. Yeah. Make it more fun, give more agency over the process, and ultimately simplify it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the couple companies that you started that didn't work out before the one that did rise. And we talked a lot today about success. I'm curious to know a little bit more about failure, right? Because we typically fail more than we succeed. Jeff Bezos put this really nicely in one of his shareholder letters when he talked about making decisions and approaching the potential of failure as either a two-way door or one-way door. Two-way doors, reversible, right? Reversible decisions, failure that can be undone or at least mitigated, and the one-way doors, not as much. Think about that in terms of your own life and what advice you might give to others out there, whether they're in the entrepreneurial space or outside it. How did you manage the failure and what might we do as well?
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I love the two-way door versus one-way doors. I mean, Bezos put that in his first like 1997 shareholder letter, and then he brought it back out in 2017 during the 20th anniversary because he thought it was that important. This idea that like two-way doors decisions are different than one-way door decisions. And I think that speaks so much to, I think, a level of risk that we're willing to take in our life. I took risks and I failed in my first two startups. And then I joined another one called Groupon, which did very well for the first couple of years. It grew from, a $0 business to a multi-billion dollar business in a very short period of time, brought on thousands of people, and grew to become a public company. But a lot of that came crashing down, and I was part of that entire journey from the ascent all the way to the top, all the way to the crash. And so I had gone through three experiences that did not work. Not a great track record. I got asked to speak at a conference called FailCon about some of these failures. And FailCon stands for Failure Conference. And I'm out there on stage and I'm giving this talk. And I didn't realize this, but there was a reporter from the New York Times in the audience. So fast forward to a full-length article on failure with my face as the cover of this article.
Oh God.
And and this is like 2013 when failure was just starting to become a topic that we were getting used to talking about.
Yeah.
And the article went so viral that there was a point in time, I kid you not, where you could have Googled the word failure. Like that's it, just the word failure, and my face would have been your top search result. So, so I'm literally the internet's poster child for
Yeah.
failure.
Yeah, you're the poster boy for failure. Unbelievable. So thinking about that, I guess failure ended up being a teacher for you, right? Is that how you overcame it and kept pushing through?
It did. I mean, it was embarrassing. I'm trying to be perceived as successful. I want you to like look up my name and see like a bio that cites all my accomplishments. And instead, the first thing you're going to see when you look up my name is an article outlining all my failures in the New York Times. And so I somebody who was very important to me convinced me to do something with the article. What she said to me at the time is that long-term success comes from short-term embarrassment
Hmm.
if you can do something with it, if you can
Hmm.
learn something from it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
being resilient isn't just about sort of getting back up on your feet. It's about learning something every time it happens. And what I decided to do is I started to send this article out to all these people that I admired. I would look up their email, I'd find their emails, and I would just send this to them. And so I emailed Oscar-winning filmmakers, celebrity chefs, coaches of professional sports teams, leaders of large iconic companies, people who had no idea who I was, but I would send them a link to the article and I would say, hey, as you can see, I don't know what I'm doing. Would you be willing to give me some advice? And the response rate to that email was extraordinarily high, extraordinarily high. But more importantly, the conversations that came next were honest. They were open. I was starting to learn things about these people that were very much in the public eye, but I was hearing stories that I could not find on the internet. They were non-existent. It was about the mistakes. It was about the setbacks. It was about the failures. It was all the things that were just hidden behind the scenes. And all of a sudden, I started to realize that inside that was really the treasure trove of lessons and learnings. I took those learnings, I applied them to my next startup. My wife and I made a deal, which is like you get one more in you, and if it doesn't work, you're done. You're done being an entrepreneur. You're going to get a job. And so I started this next company. I took every practical learning I could from these conversations, every pattern that I could find, applied them to that. That was a startup that worked. But it also opened up a second path for me, which I started to write about these things. I started to write articles and blog posts. And eventually those articles and blog posts became books. And it became a speaking career. And it became coaching leaders and executives about like what are these things that are happening behind the scenes? And it would come to punchlines that like were obvious in hindsight, but sometimes in the moment are illuminating. Like what we just talked about when it comes to the 55-5 model. The reason that matters is because when I looked at the career paths of people who were able to gain momentum in their lives and their careers, they were able to just continue to advance over and over again, versus people who fizzled out. The people who fizzle out in their careers, and by the way, there's a lot of them, they didn't fizzle out because they ran out of time. They fizzled out because they ran out of energy. They simply just didn't have enough gas in the tank to keep going. So, 40% of C-suite executives right now are thinking about leaving their jobs due to workplace stress. That's prematurely. They didn't intend to do that. They want to keep going, but they just simply just don't feel like they have enough gas in the tank. That's a huge problem because when we think about time management, like there's plenty of resources out there for that. You go to Amazon and look up time management, you're going to be met with 50,000 plus book results. But how to manage our energy? That's like a whole different set of skill that we aren't really prepared for. We don't know how to do that for ourselves. We don't know how to do that for the people around us. And that's why I decided to focus my attention in that area.
Yeah. And it also speaks to managing that fear, right? If you hadn't done that and fearlessly reached out to those high performers and celebrities and top people at different companies, you would never have unlocked those secrets, as it were, to help you take that step. So success was a journey, but failure was a step that led you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you talk a lot about fear, like in Joe, and and I think it's such an important conversation. I mean, I think the thing that I've learned more than anything else is like, you know, I don't I actually get pretty scared. And I think that like for me, every time I take a risk, people give me a lot more credit for being fearless. But the truth is that I actually do have a lot of fear. What I have found though is that most people I admire also when I go back to that moment when they made the jump, they made the leap, they were actually feeling fear as well. And so I think that it's important for us to realize that courage isn't necessarily a necessary ingredient for action, right? Because that's the way that most of us sort of see the world, which is that we build up enough courage and then we take action. I think that the important thing that I've learned from most of the leaders I've studied is they just kind of reverse that equation. They, instead of letting courage lead to action, they let action lead to courage. And I think that's kind of the funny thing that happens is when you decide that you are going to go do something, courage has a funny way of just catching up along the way.
The book is Everyday Dharma. The docuseries is Business Class and The Man. And I feel like this conversation was a success by any measure, by any means, is Suneel Gupta. Suneel, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Joe, thanks so much for having me.